Hello, everybody. Welcome back again. This is your boy, Chris, the apologist in Detroit, coming at you with part two of the contextual problem of evil. Or to put it another way, answering the question, does the Bible promote evil? Particularly genocide and spoils of war. So here we go. If you didn't see the first installment of this, there's a video. I'll try to link it in the comments so you can just pull it up and watch it first. You should watch it first because it kind of sets the stage of the world that the Bible was written in. And so this here is the next stage, answering specific challenges from that world. Again, as I always say, I never set out to change people. Like, I never set out to, with a single video, convert a person to Christianity. I just think that's unrealistic. People are way more complex than that. I try to make videos that are thoughtful and that help people to think more clearly about these things that they have opinions about, that often that they don't understand the original context. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to explain the original context, so at the very least you can think clearly about these things as you are determining whether or not Christianity is a worthwhile religion for yourself. All right, that being said, what was the worldview? What was the goal of the Bible in the Old Testament? It was human flourishing. I talked about that in the previous video. Be fruitful, multiply, subdue the earth. Genesis chapter 2, right? So this is the backdrop. This is what the goal is, and this is what drives behavior in the ancient world. Being fruitful, multiplying, and having a flourishing human society. All right. So in the midst of this, what you have is God, infinite, all wise, beyond our ken, explaining to us what he's doing or what his goal is, us having a relationship with him, us being his priest and stewards of sorts. He's explaining that to us, but and to put it kind of in like real basic terms, like, it would be like us trying to talk to a kid and trying to explain the dynamics of, or how a car works, or how reproduction works. Just like it would be difficult for us to explain that to a child, because a child doesn't have the accumulation of knowledge to be able to comprehend the nuance of what we're talking about. I think that we didn't have the accumulation of knowledge to be able to comprehend what God is. So God basically worked with us where we're at. Hey, stork brings babies. Hey, you push this button to turn this key, car starts, and it goes. You just explained it in such a very basic way. You're condescending this information in such a basic way just to keep people moving along so that they can so you can get to the finish line ultimately at some point. So human flourishing is the ultimate goal in background of what the Bible is promoting here. And there's this aspect of condescending information that we're dealing with, which effectively makes it where things don't always look idealistic, So things aren't going to look like how they may not look how they work, because the people just didn't understand that. In addition to that, as I explained again in the last video, you had this issue of they lived in a much less technologically advanced world. So some of the ethics were driven by some of the outward working of the ethics were driven by the actual technology and era that they lived in. So things to keep in mind. So what is the claim about the Bible? The claim is that God called for genocide of the people that lived in the promised land prior to the Israelites moving in. So most people appeal to two passages for this. One is Deuteronomy chapter 7. So I'm going to read the first two verses. When the Lord your God brings you into the land and you are entering to possess and drive out before you many nations, the Hittites, the Girgashites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, Jebusites, 7 nations larger and stronger than you. And when the Lord your God has delivered them over to you and you have defeated them, then you must destroy them totally. Make no treaty with them and show them no mercy. That's verses 1 and 2 of Deuteronomy chapter 7. Next, I'm going to read this is Joshua. This is actually during when they're actually fulfilling this, what was just talked about in Deuteronomy. This is chapter 11, verse 20. It says, "For it was the Lord himself who hardened their hearts to wage war against Israel, so that he might destroy them totally, exterminating them without mercy, as the Lord had commanded Moses." All right, so what people do is they read these verses and they think, well, here's God telling the Israelites to commit genocide, to completely destroy a group of people. Well, what we have to learn how to do is have to learn how to read ancient literature, because these words are written in a high context world. Like we're a low context world. We've got endless amounts of paper to write in detail every single thing that we want to. This is why our books are so big. You get one thin book of the Bible, you get a real big commentary, because there's a lot of background data. They didn't have technology like us. They didn't write as prolifically as we do. Most of their stuff was communicated in oral tradition. So what was actually written down often is very condensed, emphasis on dense format. So you got a lot packed into that, and so what we have to do is what theologians do is they read other writings in the ancient world, and they see how these words are used. They read other biblical writings, and they make a composite understanding of what's actually being implied. And so that's one way that they're kind of driving down and getting a better understanding of this. The second is in biblical translation is a challenge in and of itself, because the oldest parts of the Bible has a very condensed vocabulary. The further into the Bible you go, towards the New Testament, the vocabularies become more expanded. And with the expansion of these vocabularies, sometimes it's difficult to narrow down the meaning of certain words, because the further back into the Bible that these words are, they are used in a greater variety of ways. Whereas as language evolves, you get slightly better understanding of what some of these words mean. So right now, there's kind of a renaissance in biblical interpretation, particularly of the Old Testament, because after the discovery of the Rosetta Stone and us recovering Egyptian hieroglyphics and other Coptic languages, and even having a better, clear understanding of older versions of Greek, we were able to create lexicons for all of these lost languages and began to study the cultures and vocabularies of these lost languages. And so, all of that happened. Rosetta Stone was was like 1698, I think. And so it took 100 years for them to figure it out and then create dictionaries. So you're just now, since the late 20th century, early to mid 20th century to now, which is basically the last 150 years, is when people are really learning to understand the Old Testament so much better. So this is why it's important to recognize when you're reading the Old Testament, it's not as simple as just read it in English and it says what it means. There's a lot more to it. It's condensed. They were a different culture, high context. They were a high context culture. We're a low context culture. So you really have to learn how to interact with the Bible in a way so that you can actually get to what the Bible was getting at, versus just assuming you know it and implying and importing in your interpretation, modern sensibilities that the people that back then they just wouldn't have had, because they didn't have the advantages that we have. Their world was a different world. So I also want to read another verse, because I'm addressing the issue of spoils of war. Also, this is going to be Numbers 31, 17 and 18. Hold on one second, because apparently I didn't. Numbers 31, 17 and 18. 17 and 18. Just going to pull that up real quick. And I'm going to read that also. This passage says, Numbers 31, 17, 18. Now therefore kill every male among the little ones, and kill every woman that hath not known man by lying with him. But all the women, children that have not known a man by lying with him, keep alive for yourselves. So basically, the older married women, kill them. The older boys, kill them. If they're a virgin, if they haven't been married to a man, they can stay alive. You keep those women, and if the kids that are beyond younger, that aren't old enough to basically fight in war and to remember war, implied, you keep them as well. So what's going on here is first of all, let me. So those are the two challenges: genocide and spoils of war. So for the genocide point, I'm going to respond to that one first, real quick. What it was that we're reading, I believe, is that we're reading war language. What war language is it's like when we use hyperbole. So if we talk about sports, we go, this team killed that team. This team destroyed that team. Man, he was, that's how we talk. That's how they talked in the ancient world also. So what's going on with the whole destroy them all utterly is simply hyperbole. How do I know this? Or why am I arguing that this is the case? Not because it's convenient for my religion. I'm arguing this because all you have to do is read the text and you'll see ultimately what they were getting at. If we go back to that Deuteronomy chapter 7 chapter, it says, when the Lord your God brings you into the land you are entering to possess and drives out. What is this term? This term drive out is to make them run away. And there's so many passages that talks about this driving out. Exodus 34:11, 33:2, 25:28-30, Leviticus 18:24, Deuteronomy 6:19, Deuteronomy 9:35, 11:20, Deuteronomy 11:23. So even chapter 7:22. There's probably 20-30 passages, even in the New Testament, Acts chapter 7, verse 45. The goal was to drive out these people. This whole notion of exterminating these people is just hyperbole. It's just war language. It's just how you talk about going about your job in a way that communicates the urgency of what you're doing, not literally what you're actually doing. So when I'm in Detroit, the Pistons. If I said that the Pistons killed the Lakers, I don't mean that anybody, that Magic Johnson and Kareem or James Worthy have died. I'm simply talking about how significant and dynamically the Pistons dominated the Lakers. They swept them. They beat them in 4 games. That's just a way of using hyperbolic language. That's just how that works. So I think that the real implication of the Bible was to drive these people out. This is further illustrated by the fact that you can read other Bible passages past that, like when you get into Judges chapters 1 and 2, you see all of these people still living in the land among the Jewish people, and they're not. You also get into like Chronicles, and you get into genealogies, and you see them giving genealogies of these same people who continue to live among them, because the goal wasn't to exterminate them as a people group. The goal was to depose them, to drive them out of the land, because these people were doing what was counterproductive to human flourishing. They were causing lots of wars and needlessly killing people. And somebody might argue, well, the Israelites are having a war with them. Just look up and read the topic of just war theory. And so you can kind of get an understanding of that. So anyway, Israel was committing a just war. Israel, if you look at like Genesis chapter 15, verse 16, when God initially announces that he's going to drive these people out of the land to Abraham for his descendants, he says these people's sins have rebellion, basically haven't yet reached the height of me dealing with it, So when I deal with it, I'm gonna deal with it. But the whole point of it was to drive them out, and driving them out was so that he could put Israel in the land, and Israel could model human flourishing. Deuteronomy chapter 4, when God is talking about again human flourishing. This is just to get into back part of the background. So why would God tell them that it's okay to keep the women, the unmarried, the virgin women and children? Because again, the goal was human flourishing. With the first of all, you're destroying these people like the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Jebusites, all of these people groups that's referenced here. If you look back into history, these are people who worship like false gods like Moloch. Moloch's a bull-headed, furnace-bellied god where you take your baby and stick it in the hands of Moloch and it shrivels up and dies and drops him to the belly. And you do this because Moloch is supposed to make you make you more fertile. They worship the Baals and the Ashers, gods who were about protecting you in war. Like, these were like war gods. These were gods that basically encourage you to go to war, kill other people, and subjugate other people, and that these gods were going to preserve you and make your flourishing better. Not all human flourishing, just your little small people group of human flourishing better. And not even really better because it promoted evil, destructive values. So these are the people that God is judging and dealing with because they are counterproductive to what the human, what God's command of for the human enterprise, which is be fruitful, multiply, subdue the earth, human flourishing, right? So the keep the women and children was about you're killing all of the adult men that are in war, and you're also killing the older men who would potentially grow up and and decide that they're going to fight against you. More war, which is, the whole point. War is bad. We don't want war. So you're killing the people who would potentially continue to cause war and destruction amongst human beings. Who's left over? It's just a bunch of women and children who are incapable. Like, they don't have the luxuries of the world that we live in. In their world, if the Israelites leave them, they're likely going to somebody's going to come by and rape them, kidnap them. That's what's going to happen. The Israelites aren't raping and kidnapping them. The Israelites are going to care for them, are going to take care of them, provide for them, and give them hope in the future. Because in the ancient world, there's always all this talk in the Bible and the Old Testament about having as many babies as you can, because that was security. That was human flourishing. That was security. So what Israel's doing is actually righteous. It's giving these people who would otherwise be hopeless a hope in the future by taking responsibility for them. And that just encompassed in the ancient world, marrying them, not having them as slaves, but marrying them and taking care of them. So that's what's going on with the Numbers 31, 17 to 18, when it's talking about keep the virgin women and children versus killing them. And again, they're not killed. If they were told to exterminate everybody, then why are in other places they're told to keep these people alive? Again, high context. You have to understand what's going on and what's being advocated for. So in summary, real quick, the real evil in the ancient world that's being dealt with is people, different groups of people who are choosing themselves over all of humanity. They're choosing to subjugate other people through worshiping false gods who encourage them to have needless wars and the loss of life, and to steal, take stuff from these other people without purpose. The Israelites, on the other hand, are being commanded to live in a righteous and just way, and as models to the other nations in society, so that these people would see the true and living God, Yahweh, and turn back to him from these false gods. All of the actions that are being taken are in an effort to promote human flourishing, to promote the maximum amount of people living, not only living, but living a high quality life. And a high quality life in the ancient world meant getting married, having as many kids as you can, and living in a community that cared about human life, not that just burned their babies to Moloch, not that worshiped war gods, not that went around stealing everybody else's stuff. So this is what's going on with this command in Deuteronomy chapter 7 and Joshua chapter 11. This is what's going on in Numbers 31 And if you have any questions about that, please drop them in the comments, okay? Thank you so much. Look forward to hearing you guys' feedback. Again, I would, if I wasn't as, if I didn't understand these things as well as I would, I mean, these things would make me cringe. It would make me uncomfortable, because the reality is, in a world where we have the luxury of technology to make our lives easier and for us to be able to survive on our own and not to need to live in community, it's easy to ignore the fact. It's easy. It would make you uncomfortable when we hear some of these things, but when we think about these things in a proper context in the ancient world, without all of the luxuries of the that technology brings to our lives, and how togetherness, you were forced to live in community, and you realize, man, these were really righteous and virtuous laws. These laws were designed, commands were designed to help all of humanity live and flourish better, not just some small group of people. So thanks for tuning in. Again, love to hear your feedback.